Hey everyone, you're tuned into InfoQuench with Jeff.
And Amy. Join us as we talk about anything.
And everything.
All the stuff that makes life interesting.
So let's get to it.
We isolate now, so when we gather again, no one is missing.
Hey everybody, you're listening to InfoQuench with Jeff.
And Amy. And that was a little haiku about the importance of isolation and following the advice of public health, including the wearing of masks in public places.
What is it with people who don't want to wear masks?
I don't know.
I hope we get into that.
There's a strong correlation between Trump supporters and people who don't want to wear masks.
Why is that? And you know what's ironic is that they don't want to wear masks, but when Trump is doing a rally, what does he throw out to the crowd? Masks.
And paper towel.
And paper towel. I mean, it's just, anyways, it boggles my mind why people won't wear masks. Just recently, we live in St. John, New Brunswick. Just recently in Moncton, they had a huge, well, I don't know how huge it was, but it was a
Well, it's an
big
ongoing
rally.
outbreak in Moncton and in Hamilton, so two regions in our province. So they're, just last week, they implemented having mandatory masks in all public places, which we've been doing anyway as a family. We've been wearing masks whenever we go inside a public place, and even on crowded sidewalks. I've been wearing masks since March, since we, really got became aware of the ongoing pandemic and the need to protect our community.
Yeah, your right not to wear a mask is trumped by making people sick. You know what I mean? If you're making people sick, you should have to wear a mask.
We might have to hollow the thesaurus and not use the word trumped.
Yeah, I guess so. But I think it was warranted in that particular sentence. It made actual sense. I wasn't referring to Trump.
No, I know. I'm just bugging you.
Yeah.
Just bugging you.
Yeah. What's next?
What's next? What's the next one? This episode is all around need to know facts about masks. So I think a lot of us have come to grips with the fact that we need to wear masks as part of our ongoing lifestyle now. It's, it's mandatory in a lot of areas, depending on where you're listening from. But regardless, I think it's a good practice worldwide, given the ongoing pandemic. But there's a lot of interesting things around masks and a lot of questions that people have. So I did some research to learn a little bit more.
There are good masks that work better than others, I'm sure. Like when I wear my mask, Your cousin made us a bunch of masks, and I honestly didn't even believe that we would need them when we got them. I was like, well,
right.
We probably won't even get to the point where
because
we
that was
really
months
need
ago,
to
really,
wear
that
these
she gave them
things.
to us.
But I've been wearing. She made one out of like a bandana that has like an insert for like another layer, and it's great. I love it. It ties on the top of my head and then the back of my head, and it fits perfectly.
Well, I think probably most households now have the added chore of have you wash your masks when you sort of Sunday you're getting ready for the week. Do you have all the masks washed and you're ready to go? And we have a 7-year-old, and as he's going out the door, we have to make sure he has a clean mask to take with him. He has to have an extra mask in case it breaks.
To Taekwondo, everywhere he has to wear a mask. I mean, what you did though was implement an in and out box. It's like these ones are dirty, these ones are clean. Grab a clean one. You don't have to worry about grabbing a dirty one.
Yes,
that's smart.
It did take a little bit of time to come up with a system, but there is a system
and stuff.
Because a lot of times it is super important to not wear a dirty mask. So we essentially just have a basket. The clean masks go inside it, and then as they're dirty, they go all over the house.
They do. They go all over the house.
And then I try to round them up on the weekend so I can wash them. But I'm going to talk about a lot of things around masks, and maybe some of this but I bet you there's some things you will be surprised by, because I tend to do a lot of research around this stuff, and I was surprised by a lot of what I read. So one thing was around material, and I think, common sense would tell us a more tightly woven fabric works better in terms of the community mask. So we're talking really around this in this episode around the idea of the community mask. So these are the cloth masks that are reusable, that you're washing and you're wearing out and about, as opposed to medical grade masks like N95 masks and things that are used more in a medical setting.
Absolutely, yeah.
Early on, it was, I think there was a bit of a delay for the recommendation around mask use in terms of the prevention of the spread of COVID-19. And I think that was my personal opinion around this, and this is just an opinion, is that there was a shortage of medical grade masks available, and they needed to make sure that people didn't start hoarding masks.
Yeah.
Because our frontline workers needed them to.
Like people did with toilet paper.
Yes, exactly.
In the beginning.
So I think
Can't
that there was
believe
a
that.
bit of a delay in terms of the recommendation around mask use, because they know how people are and they will hoard.
They will. They'll keep things, a whole room full of them.
But eventually it came out that the recommendation was that around more community masks, so this idea of using fabric masks, so not interfering with the supply chain for the medical community, and understanding that that type of mask is really about protecting others more than protecting you. So the idea is that when you're wearing a community mask, you have a fabric that is tightly woven enough that when you are speaking, you're not going to spit or, basically
People do a lot as well,
basically spread the virus, or shed the virus is another word that's been used a lot, by just, in your everyday interactions. Whereas, so I guess it stops the actual drops from leaving, when they leave your mouth, from, contaminating a surface or contaminating another person. Whereas a medical grade mask works in both directions. So it works not only with containing the droplets that you're expelling, but also when you're inhaling air, it's, I guess, a fine enough filtration system that it also is filtering out a virus when you're inhaling through. So a big focus has been around the community masks because they have become mandatory in a lot of areas. And if everybody is wearing them, then everybody's protecting one another. So,
well, good luck trying to get everybody to wear them.
I know. Well, I mean, in early days when I was wearing one on the side, the comments I would get, people would. It
was all new then.
I remember
though,
being
right?
at a crosswalk waiting for the light to change, and a man looked at me and first made just a comment about the fact that I was wearing a mask, and
oh, you're wearing a mask, I see.
Yeah, what a pretty face. I really can't tell.
Why would you hide such a pretty face behind such a mask?
And I said, I'm wearing the mask for you.
Yeah.
That's essentially the case. But I know a lot of us have had those types of conversations, and hopefully, people are becoming more educated on the fact that we all need to be doing this. It is a group effort. And
well, tonight I, took the little guy to Taekwondo, and I looked around, and everybody, all the parents that were watching their kids do Taekwondo, they were all wearing masks. And at one point, that would have been really weird. But I looked around, and it was pretty normal thing. Now.
It's amazing how quickly we adapt.
We adapted
when
pretty
we
quickly.
want to.
Yeah.
And when we see the repercussions of not adapting.
Yeah.
So we're lucky here. We proudly host our podcast out of St. John, New Brunswick. And because of the quick action of public health and probably, don't mind the vehicles racing by as we record. And the quick action of, public health, but also the fact that we probably just lucked out with it, in terms of not having a whole lot of international travel through our province. We've had
We're lucky that way, yeah.
We've only had
We're a small airport, and
we're recording this in October of 2020, and we've only had 2 deaths in our province. I mean, 2 deaths is 2 deaths too many, but it's relatively
Could have been a lot
speaking,
worse.
compared to what's happening around us, we're doing really well. And with the mandatory masks being implemented, people switch very quickly. I guess the threat of fines is always helpful, but it's nice to know that people are making that change, and there's they're fitting it into their lifestyle, and they're just becoming accustomed to it. So
yeah,
I mentioned the idea of tightly woven fabric. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about fabrics like cotton or linen as being best. If you're looking at like a t-shirt material or something that's super stretchable, it may not be as effective.
Yeah.
So Health Canada actually recommends a test if you're using a homemade community mask or any type of community mask that you purchase. Hold it up to a window and see if sunlight shines through. And if sunlight is shining through, it probably is saying it's a little bit more permeable than you would like.
Yeah.
The other test that's recommended is that if you could blow a birthday candle out through your mask, then it's probably not providing adequate protection in terms of you spreading the virus.
Right.
So just 2 simple tests that you can look at. So if you are using a fabric that may be a little bit more of a looser net, they definitely recommend, or regardless actually of the type of fabric, having 2 layers of fabric is more beneficial, which makes sense when you think about it. The holes are less likely to be lined up.
Double the protection.
So, it's important to kind of think about that. There are some, I think, dollar store masks and things like that are more of a single layer of fabric and may get you through in terms of, not being fined because you have some sort of face covering in a public place.
And may get you into a spot, well, now they're mandatory, so if you wanted to go someplace you didn't have a mask, you'd go to the dollar store and buy one.
Well, yes.
That's not so effective.
Right. And no offense against the dollar store. I'm sure they're selling some double layered fabric masks too, but there are some versions that are quite thin. And you may be following the mandatory order, but also think about whether or not it's truly effective. If you're going to wear a mask, why not do it right and do one that's going to protect the community around you? One of the questions I had was just around the idea of adding a filter to your mask. You alluded
we never
to that
really
earlier.
got into doing that, did we?
No, so a lot of masks you'll notice when they're made, they'll have a pocket, an extra pocket to put a homemade filter in. And, there hasn't been a whole lot of research done on this idea of the extra filter. So the idea is that you could put even like a piece of paper towel or a disposable coffee filter in, and that it might increase the benefit. But again, Health Canada says be cautious with what you're choosing to add to your mask, because if you're using something, for instance, you might think a vacuum cleaner bag is an adequate filter, which, to me, that made sense. I thought that would be it keeps dust particles from permeating, so it's probably a great filter. But the thing is that a lot of those materials are impregnated with other chemicals.
Oh, yeah. That would be pretty bad.
Or
You'd
even
be inhaling them.
Right. Or even weird fibers and things like that. So just because they are a filter doesn't mean they're necessarily safe to have next to your mouth and for you to be inhaling through. So they may be effective in filtering the air you're exhaling, but you also have to think about what toxins you may be inhaling. So in terms of what...
No one wants to be inhaling asbestos or whatever when you're trying to fight COVID, I'll tell you that much.
Well, and it's not something I had actually considered around the idea of the filters. I think coffee filters would probably be a fairly safe bet because that they're already being used for,
what kind of filters did we get from your cousin for the...
it was more of a paper towel.
Paper towel-ish. Okay.
So, the general advice from from Health Canada and from the scientific community at this point is don't get too complicated. Stick with just your basic masks. Innovators and scientists are likely going to come up with some different recommendations down the road, but it's not worth just testing out different types of filters without knowing what kind of chemicals and things you might be exposing yourself to. And if you you think about it, they talk about the idea that even a coffee filter that you use, you may think it's a very fine filter, but even grounds of coffee can get through that.
Oh, yeah.
And a virus can literally exist in quantities of millions and millions on the tip of a pen. So the idea that a coffee filter is going to provide you with that much more protection is... Yeah, there's still, I guess, essentially the bottom line around filters is there's still a lot of research to be done. So probably just go ahead and use your double layered cloth mask, and the filter piece, we'll probably get more advice down the road.
It's interesting because, it's obvious that the more people that wear masks, the more effective we are fighting COVID-19. And that seems to me, that seems like such common sense. And it boggles my mind. I know I'm going back to the same point I brought up early in the podcast, but it boggles my mind why people won't wear one. I just don't understand that frame of thinking. Like, okay, so sure they don't want to wear one, but is it because they feel like their rights are being infringed upon? Is that the main reason? Like,
Well-
or is it that they don't want to be told what to do, like a 3-year-old? You know what I mean? I just do not get it.
When you look at the Trump supporters that are interviewed at rallies, I know CNN interviewed a few to
Yeah.
ask them why they weren't wearing masks, and those are the types, if it's God's will.
Well, one of the Trump supporters was asked by a reporter, and they asked, like, well, would you wear one if Trump told you to? And they're like, yeah.
I know.
But now
and it just goes to show the power that he could have in terms of saving lives that he doesn't
ridiculous.
execute.
I know we always go back to Trump, but like, I mean, he's like the epitome of what not to do. I mean, so he's a pretty good case study.
Well, he is, and he's definitely a huge factor in the spread in our neighbors south of us here in Canada. So yeah, he has a responsibility. And
Mind-boggling. I just do not get it.
I found it interesting. They were interviewing people and asking them why they weren't wearing masks, and a lot of them were saying, "Well, if it's God's will, then I'll get COVID." And these same people were holding umbrellas to shield themselves from the sun.
Yeah, exactly.
They're wearing their seatbelts in their car. They're doing all of the things that
It just
are,
boggles my mind.
just common sense to protect yourself. But the idea around the mask, for whatever reason, is just a sticking point for some.
I always felt like not to get on too big of a tangent, but I always felt like his supporters were not heard for so long. And now that they have like a political messiah in Trump, that they'll do anything that he says because no one's listened to them for so long. They've been buried politically, and now Trump is supposedly listening to them. But anyway, Trump is going to take away their health care. Anyway, I don't want to get it too far into it, but it's bizarre. It's just a bizarre thing happening there. Okay,
no, you're right. You're right. He's supposedly listening to them, but they feel they have a voice, and they're using it now. I read a lot of articles and just trying to research for this episode because I felt like I wanted to give some extra information around masks because there is so much out there. And one of the things that people say, or one of the reasons why they say they don't want to wear masks, isn't necessarily always just around rights, but also the idea that there's just this fear of the fact that they might not be able to breathe, that they might be exposed to, carbon dioxide or all these ideas around, the medical or health implications of wearing a mask. One doctor that I was reading an article through referenced, that he deals a lot with cystic fibrosis patients and also lung transplant patients. And those individuals are probably the most respiratory compromised individuals you could find.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're incredibly immunocompromised. And he said that basically they wear a mask. They wear a mask whenever they come into a hospital setting because they understand the importance of protecting themselves and with their compromised immune system, despite the fact that they have such a hard time breathing. Yeah. They still appreciate the protection the mask offers. So,
yeah, some people just won't wear a mask because, for the simple reason that it feels like they're suffocating, feels like they're being, like their oxygen's being turned off and stuff.
And, there's ways to, practice wearing it around the house. I read articles around that too. People who have, maybe panic disorder, or claustrophobia, and they can sort of work towards that and try to figure out ways. And there are people who absolutely cannot wear it for various reasons. What
do people like that do though? That's my question. So sure, you can't wear a mask, but you gotta go get groceries. What do? Wear a T-shirt that says I've got like. The government says it's okay for me not to wear a mask?
Well, no, it's not. I mean, a lot of times the individuals who often can't wear masks are people who don't have the ability to physically remove a mask if it were to become a choking hazard, for instance.
Right.
So it could be somebody who maybe has or mentally challenged, or it could be just, incredibly young,
extreme asthma
two
too.
Or under. But they're still physically able to remove a mask. But again, I guess it's up to the doctors to decide who doesn't qualify for an exemption for masks. But people have often talked about the idea that it would make them feel faint, and I just think about the surgeons that are performing hours of brain surgery or open heart surgery, or even dentists, wearing them all day long during a shift.
You get used to it.
They've not had issues. People are not fainting from oxygen
have to tell
lack
our
of
little-
oxygen during in the operating theater because of wearing a mask. It's just not something that happens.
I have to tell our little guy, Huxley, when he gets off the school bus and stuff, he keeps it on until we get home, and he's just so comfortable wearing it,
Well, I think
And
once
that's a
you
good
have it
thing.
on and you become used to it, you forget that you have it on. I often will have one on, and I'll leave work and I'm in my car and I'll drive home with it on.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked that question by a coworker. They said, I often see people walk or driving around in their car with a mask on, but why would they do that? But one
Well,
reason is
I've
that
done
one reason is just you forget. But the other thing is that you should have clean hands. So
Yeah.
when you're removing a mask, just as important as when you're putting it on is that you have clean hands, that you have washed your hands in warm soapy water for 20 seconds or sanitize your hands. Because if your hands are contaminated, whether you're putting on the mask or removing it, then you can cause, transmission during that point of contact. So some people, if they're just going around running errands rather than taking their mask off and on and risking contaminating the mask, they just leave it on.
I do it out of pure laziness. I just leave I leave my mask on because it's not that far to go where I'm going, and I don't want to take it off, put it back on, so I just leave it on as I drive there.
So a lot of people use things like bandanas or neck gaiters,
Yeah.
and
They're
they'll sort of
probably
pull
not the
them up.
best.
Well, so that's a question that I had too. As long as if they're doubled up in fabric,
Yeah.
they should be
Is mine?
quite
I wonder.
effective.
I wonder if mine is. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't even know.
I don't even know what you're referring to.
My bandana mask.
Oh, your mask. Yes, it has double layer
there you
fabric.
go, okay.
Yes, but no, what I'm talking about, like an actual, just a scarf type of bandana,
Oh, okay.
or a neck gaiter is sort of like almost like a scarf that you wear around your neck, and it's quite a
Yep.
thin piece of fabric that you just pull up over your nose.
Yes.
So if they're doubled up, they can be quite effective. But if they're not, they can almost be worse than wearing nothing at all.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the moving and touching your face and the contamination. So, just be making sure that if you're using something that's super thin, it's probably not going to provide a lot of protection to the people around you. Another question I had was around facial hair. I had, I recalled, the
Yeah.
idea that when people are being fitted for masks in an occupational setting, I guess men in particular would need to shave and have a clean shaven face in order to get a good seal on the mask. So I wondered whether or not facial hair would
Yeah.
contribute to the effectiveness of a community mask.
I would imagine, if I had to just take a guess, I imagine it would let particles in easier because there's more openings where your facial hair is.
It would, but the idea, I guess, is that a community mask isn't particularly a tight seal. It's more about preventing the spreading of droplets versus the inhaling of the air around
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, that makes
Now,
sense.
if you're looking at a fitted medical mask, like an N95, definitely having, no facial hair to have a good seal is an important thing. But with a community mask, it really doesn't create the same seal, so facial hair doesn't really play a factor. So you don't need to shave just to wear your community mask.
No.
You can't use that one as an excuse.
I'm not shaving anyway.
What do you do if you have to sneeze or cough while you have your mask on?
I was just thinking that. What I would do is you'd probably just like remove your mask or just pull it down, sneeze into your elbow, like in the inside of your elbow, and then put your mask back up. Right? Wouldn't that be?
Well, sometimes sneezes or coughs come on pretty quickly too, right?
That's
And
true.
you don't have a lot of time to react. So according to the World Health Organization, the best thing to do is do it into your mask.
Wow, do it into your mask.
But also into the crook of your arm. So it provides an extra layer of protection.
like
so even though you
while
have,
your mask is on,
the
that makes
old,
sense.
I think long before COVID, our kids, maybe we were taught this when we were in school, I don't remember, but I know our son was the old vampire sneeze or cough. So they were taught to hold their arm up and put their face into the crook of their elbow when they
Yeah.
coughed or sneezed to help prevent the spread of germs.
Yeah.
And that was even before COVID. But the idea is that even if you have a mask on, you should still do that because there may be something with that, because there's that added pressure that comes with a cough or a sneeze that could go through your mask, that holding your arm up would help prevent that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, actually.
The World Health Organization also suggests that you could use a tissue or Kleenex up underneath your mask if you had time to react enough.
Oh, yeah.
But also, if you were to do that, you should still make sure you wash and sanitize your hands afterward. And regardless of what method you use during a cough or a sneeze, once that happens, your mask should be considered as contaminated, and you probably
absolutely.
should swap it out for a clean mask.
And get a COVID-19 test.
Well, depending on what brought on the sneeze.
I know.
It's funny because our son Hux and I and my father all sneeze when we are exposed to the sunlight.
Yes.
And it's a genetic thing. I don't know what the name of it is, but there's something to do with the fact that when you look at the sun and your pupils constrict, in some people that also causes a reflex for people to sneeze.
Yeah.
And it's very much a genetically linked thing. So our son has it too. So
It has made him not like the sun, by the way.
And if you're ever somebody who feels like a sneeze is coming on and you'll stare at a light bulb or a bright light to bring the sneeze on, you'll understand what I mean. And it only happens to some people. But because of that, when we're out in the sun, we'll often sneeze. And I always worry if people think we have COVID because of it. But anyways.
That's funny.
Glasses fogging up when people are wearing masks. I feel really...
That's an issue.
I feel for I have a lot of coworkers who wear glasses, eyeglasses. Luckily I don't have to wear eyeglasses, so I don't feel the pain of this, but they struggle with the fact that they mist or fog up. So that is a sign that your mask is not fitting very tightly around the bridge of your nose. So warm air is really what's happening, is it's escaping from the top of your mask and then it's landing on the lenses of your glasses and it's creating condensation, which is why they fog up. So creating a good seal above the bridge of your nose is key, according to Dr. Jason Sear of Humber River Hospital in Toronto.
Well, there you go.
He says you can accomplish this either by having a comfortable mask that molds to the bridge of your nose well, or by putting a piece of tape to hold it in place. I have not seen the tape thing yet, but...
Pipe fitters, though, right?
Pipe cleaners?
Pipe cleaners, rather.
Pipe cleaners, yeah. So a lot of our community masks have a little bit of a pocket around the bridge of the nose that you can slide a pipe cleaner in, and it just allows for a tighter fit. And then we slide that out when we're washing it just to avoid the pipe cleaner from rusting.
Yeah.
You can also apply some form of anti-fog to your lenses. So there was actually a paper that was printed by British surgeons that recommended just washing your glasses in soap and water and letting them air dry to prevent lens fogginess while wearing a mask.
You know, it's funny. I was just thinking that it's pretty much come to like where when you're leaving the house, you have to have your wallet, your keys, your phone, and your mask.
That's right.
You have to have your mask now. Whether or not you're going someplace where you feel like you need it or not, you may.
Right. You never know. You don't know if your car is going to break down or you're going to need to go to the gas station. Even if
I'm going to have to start taking it on runs, because if I have to go to the washroom at some point, I need a mask now.
The idea that masks, could be dangerous, well, there is a little bit of truth to that. And that only comes into play if you are not washing your mask frequently enough. So if you think about the idea that, your mask is this piece of cloth that's very close to your mouth and nose, keeping it clean and making sure that it's not ridden with bacteria is important. So the idea... I guess the recommendation is that you wash your mask daily.
Right.
So only wear your mask over the course of a day, or if it becomes wet or soiled during wear, then you should exchange it at that time too. So if it's even like I mentioned with the sneeze or a cough, you should switch it out. Because anybody who's wearing something that has a lot of bacteria, regardless of whether it's COVID or just them touching their mask or whatever, it's not good for, it can
Petri
induce...
dish.
Well, yeah, exactly. Causes lung infections, bacterial infections. So make sure your masks are clean and avoid touching it. If it's not covering your nose and not covering your mouth sufficiently, then it's not doing any good to anyone. So the people who, I see this all the time, they haul their masks down to talk to people. It's become quite a habit, and it's resting around their chin, collecting bacteria, and then they basically put it right back up on top of their mouth and nose and transfer that bacteria into the respiratory system. So
not only that, and they're hurting themselves, but they're also like, it's completely, defeats the purpose of wearing a mask if you're not going to cover your mouth with it,
So put it on.
Put it on.
Leave
Put
it
on
in
your
place.
mask.
Don't touch it. When you're taking it off, take it off by the ear loops, like off to the side. Don't grab around where it touches your mouth and nose, and keep that area nice and clean. Masks with exhalation valves were actually made more for like the construction industry. Washington Post actually did a whole article around that, and they said it's for like hot and dusty work environments because they let air escape. So in terms of being an effective mask for avoiding the spread of a virus.
That's not good.
Exactly. They're not good. So even though they may be easier in terms of breathing out and maybe not fogging up your glasses, they may not be effective in terms of...
I will say I've seen some pretty comical masks too. I've seen these videos where some people are wearing literally a funnel with like an elastic, and they're just like... it's hilarious. And then there's like the antivirus CD, like the whatever Norton antivirus CD.
Yeah. Well, and people use them for political messaging or in all kinds of, they've become quite a fashion statement. You can tell a lot about a person by the mask they choose to wear.
Yeah. Send us some photos of the masks that you're wearing, loyal listeners.
Not on Instagram though, because we're still not on Instagram. Instagram, but we are on Facebook and Twitter. So be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
And
Bye-bye.
Stay safe, wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Thanks for listening.
And remember, you can catch up on past episodes at infoquench.com.
Or just about anywhere else you get your podcasts.
Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
And help spread the word about InfoQuench.
Till next time.